Hey everyone, it's Chrono from the Headphone Show, and today we'll be taking a look at Sennheiser's HD600 and HD650. Now, the HD600 series from Sennheiser is undoubtedly one of, if not the most successful audiophile headphone lineups ever created. For many years following the original release, the HD600 and HD650 were considered by many listeners to be the standard for reference class headphones. They really drew in listeners with a sound that was often described as highly musical, natural, as well as remarkably accurate. But revisiting them in 2020 though, and considering the current headphone market, do they still remain competitive? And do they live up to their legendary status? Let's find out. Okay, so before we talk about sound, let's cover the basics for the HD600 and HD650. First up is power requirements, and both of these headphones use a very similar 300 ohm impedance driver. However, the HD600 comes in at a sensitivity level of 97 dB per milliwatt, while the HD650 comes in at a sensitivity of 103 dB per milliwatt. Without a doubt, you will need an amplifier to drive both of these headphones well, but with that being said, I did find that entry-level sources like the JDS Atom set to high gain were enough to actually drive these pretty cleanly. Now, I think it's impossible to talk about power requirements for the HD600 and HD650 without talking about their ability to scale. And in my experience listening to them, they definitely did scale. So I will be talking more about the sonic changes that I heard once we get to the sound section of this review. Up next is packaging and accessories, and unfortunately in this latest revision of the HD600 and HD650, Sennheiser has ditched the nice large case that used to package the HD600 series headphones and has now opted for a just traditional cardboard box that is identical to the one that houses the drop Sennheiser HD58X Jubilee. Nonetheless, you still get the same accessories that you would have with the previous revisions of these headphones. So both the HD600 and HD650 include a rather long 3-meter cable that terminates in Sennheiser's dual-sided proprietary connectors on the headphone side. And they do vary slightly in that the HD600 cable actually terminates in 3.5mm and has a 1/4-inch thread-on adapter, whilst the HD650 actually terminates in 1/4-inch but then has this 1/4-inch to 3.5mm short cable adapter. Okay, so now let's move on to build quality and comfort, and minus a few aesthetic changes in this latest revision, like the chassis being a little bit less round and the HD600 completely losing its kitchen countertop finish. The design for these has remained virtually unchanged since their original introduction, and with good reason. Despite being built almost entirely out of plastic, this is one of the most reliable headphone designs that I've come across. I've personally owned a couple of different HD600 series headphones over the years, and I've never run into any issues such as plastic cracking or loose parts or, unbearable creaking. So I really like the design of these, and I do feel like it's extremely reliable. The only part that I can really flaw is the pads, as they do tend to wear out extremely quickly, and you might have to swap them out once or even twice per year depending on your usage. Out of the box, I feel like the HD600 series headphones have a little bit too much clamp. However, after giving them a couple days worth of wearing them, they do ease up quite nicely. Thanks to the mostly plastic construction, these headphones are extremely light at only 260 grams. They never feel like they are weighing down on your head. The pads may look a little shallow, but I never really felt as though my ears came in contact with the driver, and they do actually provide a fair bit of room for your ears to fit in. After you give the clamp some time to go away, I think that these become some of the most comfortable headphones you can buy, and I feel like I'm able to wear these headphones practically all day without feeling fatigued or sore. I really doubt comfort will be an issue for anyone on these. Okay, so we finally get to talk about how these two headphones sound. The HD600 and HD650 were designed to be neutral, reference listening headphones, and I think that most listeners would agree that Sennheiser succeeded in meeting that design goal. So both the HD600 and HD650 possess a very similar sonic signature. They both have this exceptionally natural tonal balance that is delivered in an intimate presentation with a good sense of speed. They do, however, have differences that set them apart and can make you choose one over the other, or even own them both as contrasting flavors. So in this sound section, I'll be sharing how the HD600 and HD650 compare to each other in my listening experience, as well as how they stack up against more modern headphones. As always, we'll start off by talking about the bass, and this is one of the regions in the frequency response where the HD600 and HD650 differ a fair bit, and it does set them apart. They do still have some similarities, but listening to them side by side, it becomes very clear that the HD650 has significantly more presence in the lows, whilst the HD600 has a much flatter bass response. So both of these have a bump in the mid bass at around 150 Hertz, and while it's barely noticeable on the HD600, I would say that it's actually a very prominent quality of the HD650's tonal character. So this emphasis in the mid bass on the 650 adds a considerable but tasteful amount of warmth that does contribute a sense of fullness in the bass. Now, whilst I do enjoy the bass tuning on both of these headphones, I do feel that, at least to me, they seem to lack the precision or technicality that some more modern headphones can present in this region of the frequency response. So while their bass never sounds undefined or lacking in structure, I don't feel as though they have the control and articulation that other headphones like the HiFi Sendara or DT1990 Pro have in the bass. And additionally, they do seem to lack a fair bit of extension, actually quite a lot of it. So they're all very lacking in depth, and the bass can occasionally feel just a little bit shallow because they roll off very early at around 80 Hertz and very steeply, especially on the HD600. Nonetheless, I still think that the bass on these is enjoyable and fairly clean. It's just that they wouldn't be my first choice or option if what I was looking for was, incredible bass or a lot of bass. Okay, so now let's move on to the mids. The mid-range on the HD600 series is definitely the star of this show. Both the HD600 and HD650 have a very similar tuning that's almost identical actually in the mids, and for my tastes and preferences, I can only describe the mid-range on these as ridiculously realistic and exceptionally natural in its timbre. So both of these have a very beautiful voicing that makes vocal and instrument tones sound very organic. There is one slight difference, however, in that to me the HD650 seems to have just a little bit added energy at around 300 Hertz, and that emphasis gives the lower mids on the HD650 a subtle boost that doesn't actually sound congested, and I actually do think that it enhances tonal richness, and it does give a little bit more power to vocals and low instrument tones. If there is one complaint that I do have for both of these headphones in the mids, is that to me the upper mid range is a little bit too forward and can come across as a little bit shouty at around 3.5K. So that slight elevation there can make instruments like electric guitars or brass instruments come across just a little bit harsh in the presence region. But aside from that, I really do think that the tonality on these is excellent. I mean, I don't think I've heard many headphones that have actually had a better mid-range tuning than these Sennheiser ones. I mean, Sennheiser really nailed it with these. Resolution is actually also very good on these for the mid-range. So under $600, I think that these have some of the cleanest, most transparent resolving mids. So overall, yeah, the mids on these are just awesome. Okay, so for the last region of the frequency response, we have the highs. And this is again a place where the HD600 and HD650 do differ quite a bit from each other. So I'll start off by talking about the HD600, ignore the fact that I have a 650 in my hand. So the HD600, I think it has just the right amount of energy and sparkle in the highs. It never came across as veiled to me. Additionally, I think that has very good treble extension actually. I think that it has some good air qualities of up 10K that add this nice texture and glisten in the highs, while also it almost has like this enhanced perceived resolution from the headphone. Overall, I'd say that the HD600's treble is very inoffensive, although there were two spots that I did think could sound just a little bit peaky. So for me, 6K came across as just a tiny bit forward every now and then, and it would introduce like the slightest bit of sibilance in the lower treble. And then 10K for my taste was also just a little bit, had just a bit too much energy. So things like cymbal crashes as well as drum hits, they had just a little bit too much zing to it. But aside from that, I really love the treble on the HD600. On the other hand, the HD650 is completely different, and I would describe this as actually being a very warm, dark, and smooth headphone in the treble region. But you know, I still think that it has a great tuning, and I still feel like it's able to convey all the tonal nuances in the treble region. It's just that, you know, it is definitely very dark, and I can see how it earned the title of veiled, but still great. And resolution, I think, on both of these is fantastic. Again, I think that they actually deliver a cleaner image, more transparent image of the highs than something like the DT1990 Pro, as well as the Hi-Fi Man Sundara. And worthy of mention is that, again, just like in the mid-range, that quality of the resolution does scale with higher end gear. Okay, so let's move on from frequency response to soundstage imaging and layering. Now, the soundscape that is created by the HD600 and HD650 is a very intimate one with a very forward center stage and very closed-in lateral images. It never really feels claustrophobic, but to me, this lack of width is a bit of a drawback of the HD600 series, and it's a category where many headphones in its price range and even below it do perform better, such as the DT990 Pro or the Hi-Fi Man Sundara. Imaging is also a little bit on the lackluster side, so it has a very defined center image, very good left and right images, but there seems to be a gap at front left as well as front right. So directionality is not the most precise on this headphone. Things are either pushed to the center or left or right, pretty much. Instrument separation, however, I think is very impressive when you consider how small the soundstage is working with is. You know, I never feel like instruments get lost, and even during complex musical passages, I feel like every element in the mix has its own well-defined space. And it's actually that I think something that it does better than the DT1990 Pro despite the lack of stage, and it's about on par with the Hi-Fi Man Sundara in that regard, so I definitely think that's very impressive. One last thing I wanted to mention is that the HD600 in particular sounds just a little bit more open to me than the HD650, and that's likely due to it not having the added bass presence sort of filling up the space in the headphone, as well as the, you know, it doesn't have that 300 hertz emphasis that brings vocals and low midtones just a little bit more forward and makes them more intimate. For dynamics, I think that this is a category where the HD600 series performs decently well. They definitely don't have the strongest sense of punch and slam, but they still have a good kick behind bass notes, and listening to acoustic guitars, strings are reproduced with a nice top-end attack that gives them a feeling of like tension and presence, so I really like that. So overall, not the strongest dynamics, but they're there, and they do have a nice impact and strike that does make for a fairly engaging listening experience on the HD600 and HD650. As always, before we wrap up the video, I just wanted to quickly mention that I've made an EQ profile for both the HD600 and HD650. And I mean, these are headphones that definitely do not require EQ. They have an excellent tonality out of the box, but I always like to tweak headphones a little bit just to bring them a little closer to my personal preference. And in the case of these, it was mostly to target the upper mid-range, which was just a bit too forward for me. So if you want to try that out, I've made a post on the Headphones community forums that has all my EQ presets, and the link to that will be in the description down below if you want to check it out. To wrap up the video, I have to say that I'm always impressed when I get the chance to re-listen to both of these headphones. With their incredibly natural tonality, their very good technical performance, as well as great design and comfort, I really think that the HD650 and HD600 have stood the test of time and remain today, even in the modern market, one of the best options for headphones under $500. I think it's really just a matter of choosing, which flavor do you think is more to your liking. Do you prefer a warmer sound signature with a sense of fullness in the bass, strong, tonally rich vocals, and a relaxed, smooth treble range? Then go with the HD650. Or if you're looking for a headphone that feels remarkably true to source, has present mids, and very well articulated highs, then the HD600 is the headphone for you. If you want to listen to what many listeners, including myself, have considered to be the standard for reference class headphones, then I really don't think you can go wrong with either of these two. They offer fantastic listening experience at a great price. Anyways, that is all for me today. I hope you enjoyed this video or found it useful. If you did, do consider dropping a like. If you want to learn more about the HD600 or HD650 or other headphones, then head over to headphones.com and check out the review section that has dozens of articles already available. If you want to stay tuned for more headphone audio content, subscribe to The Headphone Show and hit the notification bell. Until next time, this is Chrono signing off.